Our subject matter for today is basic propagation and cultivation of mushrooms from spawn. I'm going to ask Jon Danielson to take it over now. So stand by, and this will be a little under an hour. And then on the far side, we'll come back and take chat questions if you have any. Jon, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you to whoever's in here watching this today. Um, like Roger said, this is going to be a very basic beginner level class on cultivating mushrooms from spawn. I like to refer to this as open air inoculation because all of these techniques essentially can be done in your garage or on your kitchen table. Very, very simple as long as you follow some sterilization procedures. It makes it very easy and you will have success on growing your own mushrooms. Things to think about when deciding what mushrooms you're going to grow is substrate and medium. What do you have available in your area? What season is it? What season do you want to grow in? And what kind of space do you have available? Do you live in an apartment? Do you have, a garage? Do you have a garden that you can grow in? And are the mushrooms that you're attempting to grow or want to grow, are they hard to propagate? Are they easy to propagate? You want to make sure that you do your research on those. You will have much better success if you just educate yourself a little bit more. At this point, I'd like to see if anybody can name any of these cultivated species that I have on screen. Of course, I can't talk to you. So if you want to email me with, your answers, that's perfectly fine. I'm sure Roger can put my email in the description below. So there's basically 6 stages for this in cultivation. It's media and substrate, containers, pasteurization and sterilization, inoculation, incubation, and fruiting. Start off, straw. Straw is very good for growing most oysters. Wine caps are another favorite. Hericium and even shiitakes can grow on straw. Straw needs to be very clean. It tends to be dirty and can be very contaminated if it's been sitting in a barn. So you definitely want to, pick out the cleanest straw that you can get. Straw also needs to be chopped to small pieces, usually between 1 and 3 inches. Straw is best for buckets, bags, and beds. It can be very messy. If you've ever done anything with straw, you're gonna go home with it in your shoes, essentially. So it is kind of a hassle to deal with. Do not make the mistake of getting hay instead of straw. It needs to be straw. Hay has too much nitrogen essentially left in it, too many nutrients, and you're going to run into contamination issues usually immediately. So make sure that you're picking straw. Wood chips, pellets, and shavings, they are the most common that is used in any kind of hobby or commercial grows. They can grow everything: oysters, wine caps, shiitakes, maitake, enoki, turkey tail, hericium, and various others, right? Most that you're going to get in wood chips or pellets is alder, maple, oak, fir is very, very, very common. Fresh chips, if you're getting, from someone who's going around and chipping up the trees that have fallen during the winter or during a storm. The pile needs to sit for a couple of weeks to months to mulch down and to off gas before you use it. Of course, it needs to be processed after that, but initially it needs to sit for at least a couple of weeks. These are all good for bags, buckets, and beds. Packaged products are very easy and very clean. Of course, they are more expensive. And do not make the mistake of trying to get pine or cedar. You will not have good results with those in any way, shape, or form. At this point, I just added this one. I wanted to take a minute to just talk about addendums or additions to your substrate. Um, Soybean hull, corn cobs, coffee grounds, and many other agricultural waste products can be used. I am actually using fir cones. I am fermenting them, which we will get to in a little bit. And I'm going to try to grow some oyster mushrooms just off of fermented fir cones. So, and I think the project will go very well. I'm actually been using fir needles up to 50% added to my substrate to extend my substrate, and it's been working very well. Coffee grounds is another one that you'll see a lot of people, say that you can. Most people have a very hard time growing directly on coffee grounds. You want to use it in small amounts in addition, basically as some sort of nutrient addition to your substrate. But and core down in the lower left-hand corner, coconut core is a very popular one that people use to grow mushrooms. Right there in the center is soybean hulls. Another one that is very widely used in commercial use, and you can even use dried, corn cobs. I've seen wonderful oyster mushrooms grown on just waste corn cobs. Logs, of course. Logs are primarily used for shiitake, oysters, turkey tail, hericium, and reishi. Shiitakes mostly are grown on oak. Some are grown on alder and maple. Logs can range in size from 3 inches around to 12 inches around, from 1 inch tiny little slabs to 6 foot long logs. Logs need to be cut during the dormant season, usually between mid-October and mid-March. So if you kind of need to hit that window in order to get the best results if you're going to try to use logs. And logs need to be kept moist once they're cut. Don't let them dry out too much and crack. Otherwise, you're not going to have very good results. Containers, onion bags, plastic bags, buckets, barrels, baskets, bottles, garden beds and logs are all suitable containers to be able to grow mushrooms in. I would say that bags are probably the primary one. Bottles are probably next in line, and then beds are probably third. Um, but essentially, as long as you can put substrate in it and put holes in it, you can grow mushrooms out of it pretty decently. Bags, hobbyists and commercial growers use bags. Bags range in size from small 4x4 by 15-inch bags to 6 foot tall, huge bags. Primarily used wood pellets, straw, wood chips are the most common substrates, and bags are commonly referred to as fruiting blocks in this case. Buckets. Hobbyist and commercial growers use buckets, small buckets, half-gallon buckets, as you see in this picture, and all the way up to 55-gallon poly drums. Wood fuel pellets, straw, and wood chips are the most common substrates used in this instance. The buckets all need to have holes drilled in them, usually about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch hole every 2 to 4 inches in some sort of pattern. Usually a diamond shaped pattern works really well. Clean out the holes so there's not material sticking, out of them. And then you're going to want to tape over the hole with packing tape, or even paper tape of some sort. But you want to tape over the holes just to help keep the substrate clean while it's sitting in there and fully colonizing. Beds. Beds are used for hobbyists and commercial growers, outdoor and indoor. Bed size can range from a 4x4 bed, by 8 by 10 foot by 60 foot long. You can look up all kinds of grows that are indoors with huge beds growing mushrooms. Beds usually, use fuel pellets, manure, straw, wood chips, cardboard, mulch, manure, right, are the most common substrates in using beds. Primarily for cultivating button mushrooms, although you can cultivate wine caps and various others. Um, Morels, Maitake can actually be done in beds very, very well. But again, button mushrooms are usually the ones that are grown in large beds. Sterilization, pasteurization methods, cold water fermentation, chemical pasteurization, hot water pasteurization, and then just chemical sterilants. Cold water fermentation method, very simple. Use a 55-gallon drum. You want to make sure that you put a drain hole or a valve of some sort in the bottom of the 55-gallon container before you fill it with any water or anything, so that when you're done, you can more easily drain it. You don't have to tip it over and, dump it all over your driveway or something. So setting up a bucket ahead of time is crucial. You can add gypsum. Gypsum is just basic. It's not used as nutrition, although there is a small amount of nutrition in there that the mushrooms can use depending on the species. But essentially, it's just to keep things from clumping up and sticking together is what it does. It kind of aerates the material that you want. It's not a must, but at this point, that's when you would add this. So add the gypsum, and then add straw, wood chips, or your pellets. You want to fill it up about half to three-quarters of the way full of material, and you want to fill it with water all the way up to the top, and you want to make sure that all of your material is submerged below the water surface. You want to cover it and leave it at this point. You don't want to agitate it. You don't want to add more water. You don't want to put a bubbler in it. This is an anaerobic process that you're trying to get a fermentation. If any of you out there have made any vinegar, this is a very similar process to making vinegar. You want to leave it submerged and covered for 2 to 3 weeks at minimum. You will know when the fermentation process has completed, when you can go and kick the side of the barrel essentially, and you're not going to get a CO2 off-gassing bubbles coming up through it and dispersing some. When you can bump the side of it and not get bubbles out, your fermentation is probably good and done. At this point, you can drain it, and you want it to stop dripping. Essentially, I won't get into what the hydration rate really needs to be, because you don't really need to know. You just need to not have your substrate completely soaking and dripping. You want it essentially mildly dry to the touch. And at that point, you want to use that material within about 24 to 48 hours. You can use it. You can push that time back a bit, but the sooner you use it, the less chance you have of getting any kind of contamination. Chemical cold water method uses lime. Lime is caustic. Don't get it in your eyes. Use personal protective gear. Another thing that you'll probably want to get is some pH paper or a pH pen. You can find those on Amazon, I think, for like $30 these days. They're pretty inexpensive. And this recipe I'm gonna list off is usually for about 30 gallons. So this is just a base frame for doing this, and you can definitely change the recipe as needed. But same kind of thing. Take your 30-gallon plastic barrel, and you want it about three-quarters of the way full of water. For a 1 to 2% solution for a 30-gallon tank is about 150 grams of hydrated sweet lime. You don't want the granulated kind. It doesn't mix with the water well. So again, usually if you get the sweet lime, it is usually in a powdered form, and mixes with the water very, very well. In addition, you can add about 50 grams of gypsum at this point for the exact same reason that I stated before. Your pH that you're trying to achieve is 12.5 or better. I wouldn't try to go too much higher than that. You could probably run into some problems, but 12.5 to 14 is completely reasonable, is what you want to look for. At that point, once you've tested your pH and your barrel's full, go ahead and add your straw, your wood chips, and they should also be pushed down and submerged with something put on the top of them to keep them pushed down and submerged. You can use other lids, you can use rocks, you can use whatever you have available to you essentially, but you need to keep all the material submerged. Um, Cover and let it soak for 12 to 24 hours. Again, drain it. Um, don't drain this out onto your prize roses or anything like that. If you were to drain it out onto your driveway, you're not going to have any problems with the acidity or anything like that. But just be aware, you probably don't want to drain it into your prize roses. um, Allow the substrate to drain all the way down and not be dripping wet. And at this point, you can pull your material and use it immediately. Usually within, I would say, 72 hours. But anything before that would be ideal. Hot water pasteurization. Um, it's a little more complicated. You need a little more, know-how and, a few more tools to be able to achieve this, but it works just as well. You'll want to load the bags either in the container itself, which is hard to get it out when you're done. You can make baskets or use onion bags to pack your straw or wood chips in, and then again, push them down underneath and submerge them completely under the water. You want to heat your water to 160 to boiling 112 for a minimum of an hour. I wouldn't go anything less than that. I actually tried to do some pine needles at about a half an hour because I was pinched for time here in the last couple of weeks, and half of my material became contaminated. So be aware that you really need a minimum of an hour at least to do any pasteurization of any materials that you may get a hold of. So, and if you're using some sort of agricultural byproduct, you don't necessarily know what's been running all over that, where it's been stored. So I a minimum of an hour. So allow your material to cool before you take it out. Don't burn yourself. And you want to remove it and you want to let it dry, same as before. Let it drip dry, and you want to use this essentially immediately. You don't want it sitting around for a week. Other microbes and molds and things will move in immediately. Tools needed, sterilant techniques, spray bottle, isopropyl alcohol, gloves, bleach. I suggest isopropyl alcohol. If you get 90% alcohol, the alcohol vaporizes and off gases too quickly to be effective. You need contact time. So isopropyl 70% is usually standard what is used. If you're going to use bleach, it's usually about a 20% solution is what you want to use. Um, you want to use a sterile technique with everything. Essentially, you want to just try not to move stuff around, cough on things, bring something in that's don't let your dog come running in and jump up on the table or something like that. Your success rate goes down at that point. Spray down all surfaces, right? Clean all of your utensils. Be aware not to spray your clothes, be aware of the people around you, but disinfect everything that you're coming in contact with, including all of your utensils that you're going to use. And flame sterilizing things like needles or knives or scissors is very effective, essentially. And avoid cross contamination. I'm sure all of you have seen a show where the surgeon washes them up and then doesn't touch anything. Essentially, it's kind of the idea that you want to do when trying to do this, even though we're doing it outside and there is airborne contaminants all around us. Just try to be aware that being the cleanest that you can possibly be will help in doing success in growing mushrooms. Inoculation, bags and buckets. So use about a quarter to a half a cup of spawn per layer. Start with a 1 or 2 inch layer of substrate, wood chips, straw on the very bottom, and then put a layer of spawn over the top of that. As you're packing it in there, you want to make sure that you're eliminating any air pockets. And you want to continue layering all the way up until the bag's full or the bucket is full. Shake to distribute if you need to. Once the bag is full, close it up. Either use cable ties, zip ties, heat shrink, um, heat sealer. Staples work very well. I use staples all the time and it works wonderfully. I just fold the bag over a couple of times and staple it closed. Buckets should be overfilled to prevent any air gaps underneath the lid. That's very important. You don't want to be growing mushrooms that you don't see underneath the lid and having them rot underneath there and contaminate your substrate. So once you've done that, you go ahead and label your bucket with when it was inoculated and what species you inoculated it with. Incubation. Warm method includes essentially sitting in about an 80-degree room. I left this in here. There's an argument within the mycological community whether this is necessary or not. Most guys that have a whole bunch of bags or buckets sitting in a room that were inoculated, the heat from the buckets and the bags themselves will usually heat up the room to 10 degrees or even 20 degrees warmer than outside temperature air, right, that comes in. So yeah, even though you will find this quite a bit in the different books that warming it up or putting it on a heating pad, it's totally not necessary. But again, I left it in here because it is in most of the literature. So, and letting it sit there for about a week is essentially what you want to do. Just let it do its thing and fully colonize as you sit there. Cold method, you can refrigerate your substrate, your bucket or your bag down to 35 to 50 degrees for a couple of days to a week, and then pull it back out and set it on the counter. For certain species, that works really well. That in certain species you almost have to. In some others, you definitely don't want to do that. But once fully colonized, you want to cut holes in the bag or in the tape that was put over the holes on the buckets to allow for mushrooms to fruit through the holes that you have provided for them. You can suspend the bags off the ground, like you see in the picture here. You can also, put them on your kitchen counter or in a clean, fruiting chamber, which I'm not covering how to do that here, but you can always look that up on how to do it. But a kitchen counter works just as well to do all of this. Not a problem. So. Buckets can be stacked on top of each other. If you get too crazy, getting too many buckets, be aware. I have seen guys, stack buckets and have them fall over on top of them. So be aware of that one. Fruiting. Fruiting should occur within a month. Mushrooms will emerge from the holes that you have provided. Oyster species, they lots of oyster species will benefit from being put in the fridge or having the temperature cooled down for 3 to 5 days. That'll force fruiting. Um, once once you've got mushrooms flushed and fruiting, you can go ahead and cut those off or pluck them off. Um, at that point, you can take your bucket and you can submerge it in back into water, and allow it to sit for 24 hours and pull it back out. You're just rehydrating the substrate essentially, and you can get subsequent, 2, 3, 4 flushes from doing that way. Beds, preparation and inoculation. If you don't already have a raised bed, you definitely want to dig down about 6 inches at least as a minimum. You want to take that material and put it aside for the end. Um, at that point, you want to take some cardboard is usually a really nice one to use for your first layer on the bottom. You can use sawdust and wood chips and straw, but the first layer needs to be a little bit thicker. And again, cardboard works really well for this one on the bottom. You want to do a layering process. So you put the first layer of cardboard or sawdust or wood chips down, and then another layer of spawn on top of that, and then subsequently another layer of wood chips, sawdust, straw on top of that, kind of like you would do, in lasagna. If you're doing wood chips, you can do 3 inches. If you're doing straw, I suggest doing much thicker, up to 6 inches. All that material is going to pack down quite quickly. And if you're doing wine caps, the wine caps are going to chew that up very quickly. And so you're going to lose depth quite quickly. Um, Once you've layered over and over and over all the way up to the top, you can take the material that you've put aside and put it back on top. It's called a casing layer, and essentially it's there to just keep moisture in and keep your mycelium nice and cozy and safe. Um, if you were just doing a raised bed, I suggest going out and buying some bagged soil that you can put over the top as a casing layer. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward to do a garden bed. After inoculation, fruiting can occur within 2 weeks or 2 months to 12 months, depending on species. Once your bed is established, mushrooms will return seasonally as long as you keep it nice and moist. Don't let it dry out during the summer months. And you'll need to feed your bed. Um, Add about 1 to 4 inches of new material at least. That can be wood, straw, mulch, usually in the fall. That also helps it, protects it from frost and predators and bugs and various other things. And your bed will continue to. I started a wine cap bed probably 4 years ago. I add, a top layer is all I do, of a couple of inches each year, and I get wine caps every single year. So logs logs should be soaked before they get drilled. Um, Usually with logs, what is used is dowel spawn. Although sawdust and bran spawn and other kinds of spawn are used, dowels are primarily the main one that the industry uses. And I would suggest getting dowel spawn if you want to do logs. Um, dowels use Dowels can vary in size, but the standard ones are 5/16 is what you want for a drill bit. And you want to go in about half an inch into the log. Drill holes again should be in a pattern, a diamond shaped, usually about 6 inches apart. You can fudge on that one. You can go down quite a bit, but you don't necessarily need to. The mycelium will fully colonize the log. So if you can get away with using less dowels, then you can do more logs. Make sure that the plugs are all the way in there flush, and then they get sealed over with wax. And like I said, this is just an introduction, and I'm not going over exactly how to do all of these. But if you're interested in any of these and you want more clarification, please email me. I'd be happy to help you if this is some project that you would like to do. Fruiting, once you've done your longs, um, can occur within 2 months to 2 years. Mushrooms, again, will return seasonally. You need to keep them covered and nice and moist during dry periods. And you can grow a lot more than shiitakes on logs. You can grow hericium, all kinds of oysters, enoki. It is a really nice way to be able to do it and kind of set it and forget it type of thing. And the only thing you got to come back to do is essentially maybe cover it or make sure that the logs aren't drying out too much. So if you don't want to put in too much work and just kind of want to again set it and forget it, this is a really good method to be able to use. Thank you very much for coming and listening to my talk about very basic beginner level cultivation of mushrooms. At this point, I would, if you have any questions, please field them towards Roger and he will field them back towards me. So,
Well, I have a question or two for you, John.
yes.
So, let's say that I wanted to grow Hericium, lion's mane. Now, this presentation is focused mostly on oysters. How would you do it differently for lion's mane?
If you were doing it on logs, essentially, you wouldn't do it any differently. You would take your logs, you would drill the hole, soak the logs ahead of time, drill your holes, inoculate it with correct spawn, seal the holes with wax, and set them aside. If you were doing bags, again, there really isn't any difference. You want to inoculate your bags, you want to do it in layers. You want to wait for the bag to fully colonize, and then you just cut small holes in the side of the bag and allow it to fruit through those holes. Now with lion's mane, the only thing I would say is you probably don't. Oysters, you can have multiple holes. Lion's mane, you usually only want to do one. Otherwise, you end up with a lot more smaller lion's mane, and everybody likes the big chunky, plate size lion's mane. So that would be the only thing that I would suggest at that point. Anybody else?
Okay. Yeah, I got one more for you.
Yeah.
Uh, let's say we're doing shiitake, and if I do it in logs, it takes like 1 to 2 years. That's a really long time. If you grow shiitake on straw or sawdust or some other substrate, something that's ground up and a little bit easier to digest, can you reduce that time to fruit?
Yes, you can reduce it down to about 3 months. So from beginning to end. So that's putting spawn or um, putting anything on agar. So depending on how you get your culture going, essentially from either spore or from another culture. But I'm basically saying from plate to actually having mushrooms, you can do it in 3 months that way.
All right, very good. Do we have any questions from our local Zoomers, Susan or Jane?
I have one question. Thank you, John, first of
Yeah.
all, for teaching us the basics. This is so important. Chet and I have a question. How do you keep keep the habitat moist, especially in summer months? Like, what do you do with them?
For logs outside,
Uh-huh.
put them in an area that is generally shaded and moist. On, let's see, what the north side of your house, I would suggest. Um, it gets the most shade, and covering them with a tarp, and
Okay.
then if they start drying out at all, you can spray them down with a hose, and just allow, a moisture zone to essentially occur by putting the tarp back over once you have watered down those. Other than that, I don't have a good answer for you. It takes a bit of due diligence to try to pay attention to. And when I first started, I let my logs dry out way too much, and they didn't fruit worth a darn, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it is something, there is a bit of a learning curve there, but just knowing that it's, 90 degrees outside, well, maybe you should go over. If it's August and it's 90 degrees, go over, pick up the tarp, spray them down with water, put the tarp back on, check them in a couple of days. It should be fine.
Can I have a quick follow-up question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would be the ideal airflow and sort of moisture level, like percentage?
Oh, well, for most mushrooms, the moisture level is somewhere between 70 and 90% is what
Okay.
you want to shoot for. And of course, most people probably don't have a moisture meter, but it's 70 to 90%. And that's if we were living in Arizona, that would be a lot more difficult to achieve. But living here in the Pacific Northwest, that's usually a pretty easy thing to be able to achieve. So, did I answer that, sufficiently?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, that was a great presentation, John. Thank you very much. Would you give us your email address for our viewers?
Um, Mike's Mountain Mycology at gmail.com.
All right. And folks, OMS members, if you're interested in that cultivation workshop on March 29th, you should have an email in your inbox regarding how to sign up. It's on Eventbrite, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you in future webinars. There will be more.
Thank
Good
you
night to
all.
you all.